Family and friends, we have gathered together to bid farewell to Joelle Hamovit and to spend a few moments celebrating her life. I am going to read a few prayers and some psalms. I'm then going to call on some members of the family to share some thoughts, and then I'll say some things myself, which will then be followed by traditional memorial prayers. We have come together sharing our sorrow to bid farewell to Joelle. We recall the blessing of her life. We thank God for all that was good and true in her life and for those precious memories which will last forever. Eternal God, Creator, merciful Father of all, your children bowed in grief seek light to dispel the dark gloom which threatens to overwhelm them. Be gracious to those who mourn, for they are in distress. Bless them with your compassion, ease their burden of sorrow, send them light and peace. For it is written, fear not, as I am with you, be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will sustain you with my power. From Psalm 16, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice, my being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life, your presence brings fullness of joy, enduring happiness is your gift. From Psalm 1. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat reshaim, u'vederach hata'im lo amad, u'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Ki im betorat Adonai chavtzo, u'vetorato yehega yomam v'layla. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. And from Psalm 15, Adonai mi agor ba'ohalecha mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. O Eternal One, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain, those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless, but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. We are now going to hear some comments from members of the family, and we'll start with Lloyd, Joelle's son.
Greetings. I get to change glasses. I guess that's the way it works, so I can actually see what I have to say. Thank you all for being here. All right? You don't have to raise your hands, but how many of you here today have received solicited or unsolicited advice from my mother at some point? All right? She always seemed to be there to listen, observe, offer kindness, and give quiet advice. Provide that problem solving to everyone she knew. She was that outlet, and she was that quiet voice of encouragement and support in so many of the lives of her family and her friends. From her very beginnings in, I kid you not, Goose Creek, Texas, now known as Baytown, and Robert E. Lee High School, Joelle was always there with her support and intelligence, courage, and kindness for others. It started with her love and support for her brother, Harry, who she helped all the way through school, through all his days, to overcome his dyslexia. At an early age, my mother traveled to sleepaway camp, Camp Appalachia for girls, in Virginia. Now imagine the courage that a 2-day train trip at the age of 12 or 13 across the country in the early 50s took. The story she'd love to tell of her train rides across the country, both to camp and later to college, from Texas to the East Coast as a young woman, showed her bravery to face the world. She had many favorite stories, but one of them was when she was put back on the train after camp one summer, ticket in hand, but they had mistakenly given her no travel money. The kindness of the porters on the train helped my mother arrive back safely in Texas, safe and fed. And my mother always trusted in the kindness of others and always showed them the same. Now she set forth as one of the first women from her small town in Texas to go away to college, to Smith College in Massachusetts. And I'm not sure that this took extra courage, but we all know how much she hated the snow and the cold, so I think it took some courage. Now at Smith, Joelle was surrounded by strong women. Well, we might even say liberated women. She learned and carried these lessons of strong womanhood and modeled them throughout her life. Some of my earliest childhood memories impressed me of my mother's courage and kindness toward the world around us as she acted on her convictions. On many occasions, as small children, we would awake to a house full of young adults. You might even have labeled them hippies, whom Mom had gathered up at the local temple and brought home to feed and house as they traveled to participate in the anti-war Vietnam demonstrations. In Washington, D.C., where we lived. I even remember marching in some of them with my mom, or during the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King spoke. My mother joined the food brigade, preparing food for the protesters, and then my father spent days at the D.C. courts helping demonstrators navigate the segregation and protest laws. My father, Jerry Hamovit, a smart and generous man as in his own right, had the great intelligence to recognize these same qualities of courage and intelligence when he met his wife, Joelle. And he himself was raised in a house of some strong and smart women, Rose and Sheila Hamovit. Together, my parents approached family life with the same bravery and kindness and intelligence. My parents adopted 3 children, me, my sister Ellen, and the youngest, David. They were extremely attentive in their kindness and their education and all their help towards us in every aspect of our childhood. Their shared love of the arts, their encouragement was the foundation of my own journey to become a professional artist. These were the many highlights, but tragically, no parent should ever lose a child. But the bravery they showed when my brother, David, was lost to HIV during the AIDS epidemic was both empowering and supportive to all those around him. And I will never forget that my mother stayed by her son's side every step of the way. Now, eventually, Joelle went back to school and earned her MSW in social work at Catholic University in D.C. And she went to work at the National Institutes of Health and Mental Health in Bethesda. And there she worked on the initial studies that showed manic depression was an inherited, not an environmental disease, and was a listed author on these studies. Now remember, this was before there were genetic testing, and it was the only way to track a family history was to track down the families. And there went Joelle, bravely off to mental hospitals and prisons, where unfortunately many of the afflicted of these issues had been sent. She had to interview them and the extended families for all these studies. That takes some courage. And I remember the phone calls telling me she had gone to a prison. Truly, the recognition and the care of manic depression today began with these foundational studies. And by the way, one of the other co-authors on these studies was the Dr. Anthony Fauci. All right, onward. My parents started coming to Florida in the 1980s, and by the early 90s, they were living in Sarasota, fully involved in the community, while Joelle volunteered her counseling services through the local Planned Parenthood, and my father volunteered legal services while serving for almost 10 years on the Longboat Key Planning Board. Their community involvement encompassed participation in the Smith Club, the Harvard Club, and many other charitable organizations. And they even started playing tennis and golf. Who knew? Probably the most important aspect of my mother's and my parents' lives was the importance they placed on their social responsibilities to the world and the communities around us. To be honest, there will probably be quite a few charitable organizations and an equal number of Democratic political candidates that will mourn the passing of my mother's contributions. Now, my mother and my father's legacy to the future was very important to them, and they will continue to support these organizations from the All Faiths Food Bank and the Planned Parenthood of Southern Florida to the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. My mother and father, Jerry and Joelle, always thought of others before themselves. Their lives together, 63 years of marriage, was full of grace, love, and generosity to both family and the world. Finally, my mother saw her greatest legacy in her grandchildren. There were many holidays and other occasions that passed with the family gathering here on Longboat Key. And my mother took great joy in our visits, where she would always tell stories to her children and grandchildren, whom she saw as a link to the future. My mother's love and support of her 5 grandchildren, David, Angela, Frank, Rory, and Nora, is without question the most important conviction of her later years. They all knew her as a constant source of love, support, encouragement, and stability in their lives. She always had time for you, loved the visits, the phone calls, and probably asked you too many questions about how things were going. Now, technology was not Gmaw's thing, but what a letter and a card writer she was. Honestly, I was getting Snoopy birthday cards well into my 60s. Probably her favorite thing to do was people watch. And without ever meeting them, she would give you a complete profile of whomever she picked out of the crowd and probably would be spot on. My mother knew people. She also had 5 great grandchildren. There was Maya, Kira, Vina, Action, and Iris Joelle. And hopefully there will be more in the future. But I'm sure they all will hear the stories of the brave empowerment that my mother embodied and that the legacy of her generosity for the future from my parents, Jerry and Joelle Hamovit, will carry forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. That was a very, very touching talk that you shared with us. I'm now going to call on Angela, granddaughter.
Mine is on my phone. Okay. I'm going to try not to cry. So, if you've ever taken a walk with my grandmother, you know why, even at 89, her passing feels heavy for many of us. Somehow it felt like she would always be here, drinking tea in her kitchen, reading the newspaper, and telling us stories. When I graduated from high school, I was incredibly lucky to go to France with her, my grandfather, Sheila, and Irv. She outwalked all of us every day through those tiny French villages. Before the trip, she took French lessons. And after the trip, she perfectly cataloged each day with pictures and stories. I don't think anyone told her that she would be the last of her generation for many of us, but she lived her life that way, fostering a legacy and giving my brothers and I the foundation we needed to live good, meaningful lives. She knew how to be gentle and kind, checking in about the right way to do things. She was firm and serious, delicately guiding us when we were clearly in the wrong. I did that many times. She was quick to laugh, or she was quick to cry, and she also had a wonderful open mouth laugh that made you laugh with her. Once, when I was traveling, I put up an away message in my email. It said something like, "I'm away from the computer and I won't be back for a few weeks. I'll get back to you when I return." Grandma got that email on like day 2 of my trip. So she got that away message, and she waited at least 3 weeks after that. Now, Grandma, when you'd done something wrong, she would call you and she would say, "Angie, I'd like to talk to you about something." She did that this time, and I was like, oh no, what did I do? And then she started crying, and then I started crying because she was crying, and then we were both crying. She was upset because she didn't know it was an away message, and she thought that I was mad at her and I was just being mean and short with her. Then I explained to her what an away message was, and no one had ever laughed harder at themselves. But that's how she was. She felt her feelings. She talked about them, she asked questions, and she explored everything. She had an incredible sense of style and color, and she aged in a beautiful and graceful way that I hope I can emulate. She demanded depth from the world around her. The day before she died, she asked me so many questions about my career, and she didn't want to know what my job was. She wanted to know what about it fulfilled me. How was it making the change that I felt was just in the world? Women are often taught to be one thing in this life. We are moms, we are career women, we are wives, we are kind, or we're stern. But she was always, always more than one thing. And I learned so much from that. She taught me that being a woman was not about the way I looked or the people I spent my time with, but the values that guided my actions. I would not be the mother and wife I am today without her. So it is with sadness that I say goodbye to her, but it's also with a world of gratitude. Because I know that the legacy she built will continue to grow in future generations, in my strong, smart little girls, and in the work we all do in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call on Nora.
That was very beautiful. Okay. In the depths of 2020, I was living alone and, like many, taking daily walks to stave off existential dread. And on many of those walks, I found myself on the phone with my grandmother, Joelle. At first, I called because I knew she too was confined and alone in her apartment, and so, perhaps to her misfortune, unable to avoid my frequent calls. But as time passed, I called because these conversations had become the highlights of my week. In these talks, as many will not be surprised to hear, we frequently discussed politics and the problems facing our world, trying our best to solve them. But when we were tired of the world around us, we relished in memories of our time together and entertained each other with stories of our lives apart. And it was through these talks that Joelle became not just my grandmother, but truly my friend. And to be seen and respected by her, not just as her youngest granddaughter, but as her friend, is an honor I carry with me each day, and I've cherished particularly in the days since her passing. Because growing up, I had always known that Joelle was brave, and that she possessed incredible strength, as well as curiosity and intelligence. This is what allowed her to leave a little town in Texas for a college across the country, to take a chance on a lawyer with big dreams, and then to follow her own ambitions, earning her master's and pursuing important research while raising 3 children. And it is these attributes that allowed her to endure unimaginable hardships. And I know too that she was kind and loving, and that the reaches of her generosity were wide, touching not only those she loved dearest, but hundreds, if not thousands, particularly within the Jewish community. I feel that love in each memory I have of her, and I owe so much of my own life to the reaches of that generosity, as so many here today do as well. But with Joelle as my friend, I got to learn that she was also funny, very funny, and astute, and that she loved a good piece of gossip, but more truly, that she loved to observe the humanity of the people around her. I got to see her be vulnerable and reflective, yet ever steady in her choices and sense of self. And I got to argue with her and learn from her, and in her ability to speak freely about what she was passionate, I found encouragement to do the same. I was able to see how she had built and kept so many devoted lifelong friendships, and in turn, I was able to feel pride when she relied on those friendships in the wake of losing her beloved Jerry. To be Joelle's granddaughter is an honor and a privilege, but to be her friend was a gift. And so I join you all today in remembering a beloved grandmother, mother, sister, aunt, and friend. Incredible, dynamic, and interesting woman who touched countless lives and remained curious and engaged until her final days. A woman who found frequent joy and laughter as well as unending strength. And most importantly, a woman who loved deeply and fiercely and whose memory will live on with all of us. Thanks.
I want to thank you for those beautiful words of tribute, those very moving words of tribute to a woman who obviously devoted her life to making this world a better place in so many different ways. And what a wonderful role model for you as family and friends, and for all of us, that we continue every day to make that contribution, that we don't just sit back and say, who cares, but we make a difference in the way all of us as human beings can live our lives more fully and more meaningfully. May her memory be a blessing. When you think back and say, what would I do in a situation like this? Say, what would Joelle do? And that may be your answer. I am now going to share with you the traditional memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim. Those of you who are able, please rise. I will then read the 23rd Psalm, and we will conclude this part of the service with the Kaddish. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachet Kanfei Hashkena, Im Kedoshim Otichorim Kazohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmata Shahalacha Olama, Bar Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Kenafav Olamim, V'itzvor B'itzvor Chachaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanoch B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. O compassionate God and eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Joelle Hamovit, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. I am now going to read the 23rd Psalm. I will do so in Hebrew and in English, and then the Kaddish. Mizmor David, Adonai ro'i lo eksar, binot desha yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yanachaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shmo. Gam ki erek begetzon mavet lo irara, ki ata imadi shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorarai, teshanti v'shem en roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yerdifuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai le'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We will conclude this part of the service with the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrachu te v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, b'gala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ul'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitrumam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brechu. Le'ela min ko berchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata damiran ve'alma ve'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. May the source of peace grant peace unto those who mourn and comfort the bereaved among us. And let us all say,